Chris, you're good to go.
Have a good afternoon or a
All
good
right.
day.
Thanks, everybody.
Alex.
Have a great one.
Rest,
Get well.
rest the
All right.
voice.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. So we are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. I don't normally get to do this where I'm on YouTube, so I'm going to have to be cognizant of the fact that this is actually being recorded and somebody's going to watch it later. So welcome to Office Hours. This is an experiment of Alex's. And I think about Mike Andrews had some stats up recently. Hey, Mike, are those easy to put back up? Mickey showed these stats. This is interesting. There have been 167 days of office hours, 24 weeks of Alex Lindsay's office hours started on March 25th. There's been 597 hours. This next session is on day 168. So I think what he's saying is today is number 168. So 600 hours roughly of experiment. And I think when he started, the idea was to just talk about media production. And it's kind of grown into something. We're still not exactly sure what it is, but it is an experiment. Now, you could be watching on YouTube. And if you are and you're watching it delayed, there's some links down below. And if you're interested in the conversation, you may want to get involved. So the way to do that is to follow the Zoom link, and that'll bring you into this Zoom room. Now, this thing starts at 6 a.m. on the Pacific Coast, and for the first hour, it's just I like to tell people it's kind of like when you show up at a shoot and everybody just has their coffee and the newspaper, and they're a little early. It's kind of that. It's a very open-ended discussion. At 7 o'clock, we're at about 6:30 or so. We mic check everybody to make sure they sound good. And sometimes we do a little work, like this morning, we did a little work on Victor's color. So Victor looks a little better. And then at 7 o'clock, we go live. And that's the part you're watching now, possibly. They might edit this out. I don't know. But this is a way for us to talk about media production. We take questions through our own Q&A system. So if you look in the chat below, the Zoom chat, you'll see a link to the Q&A system. If you're on YouTube, we don't read that. So you're more than welcome to have a chat amongst yourselves, but that doesn't really get read. So today in the second hour, and actually it's kind of freewheeling, but we're going to talk about audio in the second hour. Wednesdays, we talk about camera stuff. Thursdays, we usually have a guest, and I know there is a guest this week. I can't remember his name. I apologize. Fridays and Saturdays.
Peter Himmelman.
Thank you. Fridays and Saturdays are mostly about education. And with everything that's going on in the world right now, teachers need all the help they can. And considering they're all sitting in front of webcams right now, we're here to answer any of those questions. So I'm noticing something new in the new Zoom where my gallery view goes away for some reason. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to read the questions. No, me, I'll say no. Have someone else read the questions. Okay. So first question is from John Pewitt from Huntersville. He says he's setting up his new home office. His primary use is Zoom, but I might start a podcast. What should I keep in mind for audio and video quality? I think we should hear what Jeffrey Powers has to say. You're a YouTube guy. That's kind of podcasting. I know it's different, but
Well, yeah, I started in podcasting. So
what would you do for
yeah,
somebody who's just getting started, Jeff?
just getting started. Well, it depends on how they're thinking about it. It's really simple setup, either a USB microphone. You got to figure out audio or video. It's simple as that, and then focus on the audio part of the audio video, because the video is not as important unless you're doing something like graphics or something like that, showing off how to do Final Cut or Premiere or whatever editor or things like that. Other than that, if you just focus on the audio, and then figure out if you're going to do audio, do audio. If you're going to do video, do it that way. You can definitely cross in between back and forth, but I would need a little bit more information from there. Other than that, I would suggest an IK Multimedia makes a great USB dynamic microphone for podcasting. Audacity for audio. For video, depends on if you're on PC or Mac side, what software to get from there. But yeah, a lot of questions need to be asked first.
Jason?
I would say first and foremost, if you're going to do a podcast, get yourself some big, ugly Princess Leia headphones so that you can actually hear your audio. It is so important. Do not use like Bose noise canceling headphones. You need to really be able to hear things and you need to hear them at a reference level. Also, be sure that, especially if you want to be on your podcast and nobody's going to be mixing it for you, make sure you can isolate each one of your channels, especially if you've never done mastering before, and expect to master it, even if you're not going to edit it. Third thing is, don't be obsessive. Just put it out there and watch it get better. Because
Yeah,
that'll
you'll do a
base.
lot of bad episodes before you do one where you go, oh, that
Yeah, and
wasn't
that's
bad.
okay. That's part of it.
Jeff Francis?
Since he says his primary use is Zoom, get wired to Ethernet. Don't try to use Wi-Fi doing that. Jeffrey talked about, and Jason both talked about sound. Then get some good lighting. That's going to help your webcam, and make sure there's no distractions behind you. Take a look around, both audio distractions. So try to isolate yourself a little bit, close the doors, get some sound isolation if you need it to get to the rest of the house from pouring sound into your home office. Get the mic close to you, and then make sure there's no distractions in the background for your Zooming. And then if you decide to do a video podcast, YouTube kind of thing, then you'll also be set for that.
Mr. Fairweather?
I'll go with the Alex answer, which is the background has got to be flat and well lit and separated from you so that your compression is good. And also add, if you're on a PC, try and find the manufacturer's drivers for your sound side of things, because they will have better control of your audio than what the standard Windows drivers will.
Hasmukh?
Yeah, I actually need. I'm giving a webinar tomorrow just on the basics of Zoom meetings. And I Googled YouTube and I found this great video from a fellow called Jeff Francis. And he has a quick, great startup on the basics of Zoom meetings, covering the light, being connected through the Ethernet, not having the window in front, behind you, and so on and so on. So great video that I can refer this
Jeff
question
Francis. Name rings a bell. Victor?
For the podcasting side of your question, if you decide to go that way, make sure you get a solid distribution network like Libsyn, who can take care of your RSS feed, who can make sure that your stuff gets delivered, and that gives you some statistics not to get obsessive about.
I'll say something about Libsyn. I have used Libsyn for multiple podcasts, and the nice thing about Libsyn is they charge you to upload, but they do not charge you for the downloads. So if your podcast gets super popular, it doesn't cost you anything extra. Jeff Francis?
So John has put in chat some of his equipment. He's got an ATEM Mini, a Canon Vixia camera, which is actually what I'm using right now. And he has a Blue Yeti mic, which is USB. I would caution him to check his sync if he's bringing in his video via the ATEM Mini and the audio via the Blue Yeti. He may need additional software to adjust that sync.
Good point. Good point. All right. I think we killed this one. Oops, I forgot to hit that button. Next question is our own TJ Asser. He says, what should the audio meter show as a level when the mic is open and there's nothing else happening in the room, in a room set up for voice recording under both optimal conditions and under practical conditions? That's a good term. I like that, TJ. Example, my room shows between minus 65 and minus 62 dB on the WLM meters. I think you mean the left meters, maybe not, before all the computer fans kick in. Mickey?
Yeah, that number that TJ is talking about is called the noise floor. And for ideal situations, you want to be 40 dB lower than your actual signal. So if you're, we're mixing references here like LUFS versus dB, but I'll discuss it dB. ideally you want your noise floor to be at least 40 dB lower than your actual signal level. So if you're aiming for negative 20 dBFS, then uh negative 60 should be your goal. So like at this stage, like you're mentioning that negative 65 to negative 62, um that would be a you'll be at a good you're at a good state right now if your goal is negative 20 dBFS for your speech.
Jason, then Bill.
It's also worth mentioning that the noise floor, that the microphone may not be an accurate indication of the actual sound in the room. So just to give you a sense of it, I mean, an Apple Watch will give you the reference in your room. Right now for mine, it's 42 dB when I'm completely quiet. I'd say generally reference for a quiet room is about 40, just depending. But yeah, Mickey's answer other than that was perfect.
An Apple Watch will tell you how loud the room is.
Sure will.
Wow. Bill Davis.
So these are all practical and real, and you should pay attention to them. The truth of the matter, though, is that I do voiceover work and I have a voice booth, and what I want is zero. I want no noise. I want an absolutely silent noise floor. And then when I speak to do recordings for commercials and things like that, I want that level to be optimum for my recording change. So the goal, which you cannot often achieve in the real world because you've got air handling noise and people going by and there may be traffic in the distance, but the optimum is zero to your optimal signal to noise ratio. That's what the holy grail is.
Mickey.
Yeah, I mean to build on what Bill was saying is that yeah, for a recording environment, you'd want a minimum of 40 dB of difference between your noise floor and your dialogue. Of course, like if it's just a meeting, you can survive with 30. I mean, it's if it's not like for critical listening purposes. And to add on to what Jason was saying, what the Apple Watch and other and I think the iPhone also has it. I'm not sure. The meter that's there is an SPL meter, a sound pressure level meter, and that measures the actual levels that's happening in the physical environment. That's a kilowatt. Yeah. Um, and what the WLM meters are measuring is the actual like digitized signal level. So that's the difference there.
Okay. Victor, then Jeffrey, then I'm bored and we'll move on.
I'm going to put an addendum to what Bill said, which of course is correct in an optimum situation. But don't take that to mean that if you're recording audio, like for a podcast, that you should take whatever's between your voice and not your voice and silence it out. It'll sound terrible. The room noise you have is the room noise you have. And so you need to deal with that, and you can make it less, but do not just silence it out. You will hate it.
Jeffrey.
To add on with Victor, basically, if you want the best thing to do is to get the best, really good set of headphones, get 2 or 3 different pairs of different brands of headphones. And then you got the meters that are doing the job, but also record yourself, listen to what this room sounds like from there, because that helps in ultimately getting the right sound.
Well, I'm going to plus one what Mike Andrews said, what Hasmuk said, what Phil said, and what Stephen Kimbrough said, just because I want to include everybody. But also, I will say that there's a difference between recording a VO that's going to be mixed in with something and a conversation. And sometimes you do need to have that background noise. Anyway, A. Mitchells says, from coming to us from Washington, for the Pyle mic, I'm considering buying a few as spares for Shure wireless for those who move while streaming, but will also buy the adapters to go to 3.5 millimeters. Any recommendations on TA4F to standard XLR adapters? Does the Pyle need a battery-powered pre similar to the old Audio-Technica 857 adapters? And the room goes crazy. Courtney, then Bill, then Mickey.
Well, first of all, I'd get the Shure adapter, and they do make an adapter that goes to XLR. And I think it requires phantom power to power it, and it down converts it from 48 volts to the about 3 volts that the Pyle need, that a 3.5 millimeter mic will need. Let's see, what else did he ask? So that would be one way to adapt it. The other way is just to build your own, just a mini plug to a female version of the TA. I mean, a male version of the TA for him. And remember to connect the positive side to the signal side to make sure you're getting the power. Because the DC voltage runs separately on the TA4F version.
I'm always interested. There's two levels of questions that get answered here. One is you must buy this, and the other is this is how you build it. Bill, then Mickey, and then Jeffrey.
So for me, when I need to do TA3F to XLR, I use this guy. It's Amazon has them. This one's about $45. You can see them up there in the 80 or 90. This one has worked just as well for me as the more expensive ones, but there are adapters for everything.
Mickey?
Yeah, same with Courtney. I would suggest the Shure adapter, and I'm a big fan of the ambient how do they pronounce it? UML line. It's spelled EUMEL. It's by Ambient, the same guys that make all the
That's not a real word. Gear. We don't have to know how to pronounce it. Jeffrey.
So I had a Pyle mic when I started doing my YouTube stuff, and I ended up getting this one, the double over the ear microphone headset, which is the PMH-MS20. I'll put the link in the show notes. And basically, I used exactly the one that was we were talking. I think Bill just showed the beta, and that worked just fine. So, but the thing about it is I've switched to the Micronic, which is a company out of the UK, which does like a microdot type situation. So I can actually switch it out between 3.5 millimeter and the TF4A, RTA4, whatever the acronym is. And that has, I've been able to switch between my wireless mics that have 3.5 millimeter and of course to this type of connection.
All right, let's move on. Guy Blanc says from Belgium, many tips have been given here regarding remote meetings ranging from speaker positions, avoid nostril views, yes, backgrounds, earplug wires, audio sync, but especially the clarity of the audio, avoid the tin can sound. But this morning I saw the IBC live feed with none of these applied. Panel's opinions. Mr. Preto.
So my wife now yells at me every time I notice another one of these professional broadcasters with poor audio or bad lighting. So we're about all sick of it now.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
We're doing a better job than the pros all over the place.
Hasma?
Yeah, we just had the stats of how many days and hours we've spent on office hours. And this has been an insidious process that it's been slowly incremental improvements that we are now at a level that we're fully aware of the standard and bar that has been set here. So it's a little easier to be critical, but most folks haven't had this exposure or this experience.
It's fun to kick a dog when it's down sometimes. Sky?
Well, also that television is a team sport, and we've been shoved into an isolated solo act. And so that's a challenge when you don't have your makeup crew, your camera crew, your behind the scenes scene. You know, it takes no less than 20 people to do a one camera, concept.
I don't know if anybody follows Eric Naso on Twitter or Instagram, but it's great because Eric is a news shooter and his wife is a reporter, and so when she does live feeds from her house, she looks really good. Mickey.
Oh yeah. What I was gonna say was essentially what Sky was saying. Like these guys, like the big broadcasters, the traditional broadcasters, are so used to having all the resources to get these things done. You know, all the gear they want, having, because like example, like when we shoot a film, like we usually have 200 people, and I don't think like a producer of a feature film would be capable of producing something that, that would only have like one or two persons on set, on location, just because they're so used to doing things like on a macro scale. So I mean, it's definitely gonna be a learning curve for these traditional broadcasters to do things online on the web with minimal resources.
Joe, then Colin, then Bill.
It's interesting because Jon Stewart recently had a book or movie that he was released. So he was doing a virtual press tour, and during one of his Zoom calls, I assume that it was Zoom, could have been Skype, doesn't matter. Someone said, "Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you like look up a little bit because you're looking down?" Because he was in a typical situation where he had a monitor and the webcam was here and he was looking down, and he goes, I've done so many of these and no one has ever actually said anything to me. So I wonder how much of that is people just not wanting to say anything because
One of the
they're just
things,
used to that aesthetic, if you want to call it that.
Joe, one of the possible. I think one of the things that we've discovered in doing a bunch of corporate interviews online is that there is a barrier that you've broken when you enter into somebody's home, and when you enter their home via their webcam, sometimes it's hard to ask them to change things. Now, the looking into the lens, that's one thing. It's also interesting that, yeah, nobody had asked him to do that. But when it comes to like stuff like, stuff you have in the background, like why is there a shovel in the back of your shot, Fenwick? And so if you ask me to remove it, I might be offended at the fact that, well, that was my father's shovel and it means a lot to me and I want it there. So it is an interesting thing that we're doing. Let's go to Bill, then Guy, then Stuart. Oh, Colin, I do see you. Bill, Colin, Guy, Stuart.
So, okay. I just think it's interesting, this has been so rapid, and I think it mostly is because of COVID and this disruption. But I'm now seeing all these network things where not only is it a one-person crew, but the one-person crew person is interviewing somebody at a social distance and holding a boom pole with a mic 5.5 feet away under that person's mouth. I mean, that is just something we never would have seen 6 months, a year ago. And now it's common in these pickup things because I think they're signaling this is how we have to do it now. It's different out there.
Colin?
I just wanted to expand on Mickey's point. There's a rule of thumb I follow in investment strategy, that is always sell any company that cuts 10% of their workforce in any one quarter. And the same thing applies here, where you have large production companies or professional broadcasters that are used to having 10, 20, 30 people on set. When you cut that workforce by any significant percentage, even if those people are unnecessary in the strict definition of necessary, they're necessary to those producers because that's the workflow that they're used to. And when you cut that workforce, everything breaks down, even if you're keeping the essential people around, because the workflow requires the non-essential people, just because that's what that organization is optimized to work with.
Guy?
Yeah, I'm following Eric Naso as well, and I wanted to pull up that image just to show everybody how great this actually looks. There's the iPhone, and she's taken a feed from the station, but look at how well he lit this. There's a Matthews road rag there on the left. There's an aperture light, and he actually shows the behind the scenes kind of look. In another picture here, you can see the hair light there, and then you can see her prompter view. I think she's got an iPad there, but that tripod's a little overkill for that. But you can see the huge aperture light, and then there's like an up light underneath there to kind of fill in some of the shadows underneath the eyes from, some newscasters really like that up light. But
Eric's going to
very
make
cool.
sure his wife looks good on camera.
Yeah, for sure. That's a
Stuart?
nice look.
Just one word, if any producers or chiefs of staff are actually watching this, please don't send young reporters out by themselves. You're just asking for them to be getting in trouble. In London, there have been a spate of TV crews that have already been attacked with gear stolen and what have you, and it's getting more and more common. when somebody is concentrating on the camera in front of them, they're not seeing what's behind them. Somebody can come up to them, and there are plenty of bad actors around today. There was one other point that I'm making, and I'm trying to think of what it was, but I've kind of run off with a different train of thought, so I might mention it again later.
Sky?
Yes, a friend of mine who does shoot here in Seattle does go out with the security. The TV station sends him out with a very large gentleman that you wouldn't want to mess with.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen, I mean, crime aside, you could go you could go on and on about that, but people are in some regards, the younger people are more suited to working solo. Yes, to go back to Guy's question, the IBC feed, I haven't seen it. Doesn't surprise me that it's bad. I have seen postings of people. Actually, I was looking on Craigslist last night and found a lawyer in Sacramento who was pleading for somebody to come and consult to fix his Zoom situation. We may end up creating a whole band of Zoom consultants. Phil?
Did you say Phil?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I want to play devil's advocate on this for just a second. So Guy's question was really about sort of these details that we all know and observe and find important. But how much of this is, you just shouldn't wear stripes with plaids. And, there are people who are very, very particular about fashion and food and other things. And those things are very, very important to them. But to 90% of America, they're just kind of like, yeah, I like it when I like it, but I'm not going to fall on the sword for that.
Right.
So, how much of this are we, I'm looking at myself because I do that myself,
Sure.
How much are we nerding out because we like to nerd out, which is fine. But, this isn't necessarily going to be a mass market kind of catch on thing.
No, it won't be. And I do think that there is an aspect of this is like, hey, for once, I know how to solve the problem.
Right.
And so,
right.
We do have to worry about that. The question is, does it matter in the big picture? Does it matter?
Well, I know we argue that psychologically there's Zoom fatigue, and we have an answer for that. And, a lot of these things go towards Zoom fatigue. But most Zoom meetings are probably 5 minutes anyway. I mean, yeah, education's a different thing. I get it. But does it matter?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question, and will all of this go away if somebody comes up with a fatigue for this disease that we're supposedly all dying from? Right. Oh, good grief. Everybody's hand is up.
I'm sorry.
Courtney, Stuart, Jeff.
All right. Well, one thing no one's mentioned yet is I mean, it's one thing if it's the weather person doing the weather every day from their home, that it should look nice, but they're not mentioning the fact that a lot of this stuff is breaking news, and a lot of reporters are stuck out in the field without equipment and are just streaming from their phones or whatever they have with them. So they don't really have a chance to, check their makeup and make sure the lighting's right as they're standing, being tear gassed, at least in the United States. So yeah, I have to give them a pass if it's news coverage because of the state of breaking news. It's become acceptable now to air just about anything because they take, all the news stations here, even network news, takes cell phone video and puts it right in the air. So,
Stuart?
I would say to Phil's point before that if somebody is doing a Zoom meeting for a corporate client and what have you, yes, they should be putting the effort into the appearance of not only what they're wearing, a haircut and what have you, but also how they look on camera, how they speak on camera. But that's for a professional thing. Whereas if it's talking to your family and what have you, yes, you can get away with a much lower quality. Strangely enough, I actually had a production meeting earlier this afternoon because remember it's nighttime here, and literally my friends who are the crew on the feature film we're planning for next year were looking at what I'm doing here and were completely confused by how good it was while I'm telling them off for having their dirty washing in the background of their image.
So that being
the
said,
things that Guy Blank mentioned in his question, I literally saw all of those in a local council meeting Zoom that's now proudly up on the local council's website. So,
and on that note, Stuart, I'm going to ask you to take that extra loop out of your right earbud cable. I can't watch it anymore. Not at all. Jeff Francis, I think you had your hand up.
I'm going to yield. So we move on.
Yeah, let's move on. I'm done. Philip Tesoro from Brisbane, Australia says, I run my office hours Zoom on my Mac, and then I bring it in through my ATEM Mini via HDMI and monitor it in vMix. My ATEM Mini, nice gear flex there, Philip. My ATEM Mini signal into vMix's Blackmagic design input is red compared to the original image on my Mac. What could be causing the slight oversaturation of red in my vMix? OBS shows it normal.
I've seen that too.
I think it might have something to do with you have like a million different things going on there.
I don't think. Sorry,
does anybody have a specific?
My just ATEM right out of the box is a little bit red.
Plus
just
red.
Everything's a little red.
Jeffrey?
I just when I got my ATEM, I had some problems, mostly because there's a lot of capture cards that kind of work with the ATEM, but are not supported by Blackmagic Design. When I called them up, they said, we need you to hook it up straight to the TV. If that produces that same signal, then we'll take a look at it. But so that would be my suggestion, is to hook it up right into a TV, see how that works. If you still get a red signal from there, then give Blackmagic a call. If it's just an OBS that's doing that, then yeah, you'll have to figure out the chain, what capture card you're using, what resolutions you're at, if you're at 1080, what version of 1080, because sometimes 1080-60 is not the best solution. Another thing is I noticed when I unplug and plug in the HDMI into the ATEM, it does do a color shift before it finally locks in the screen.
Okay. Stuart, did you have your hand up? And if I come to you and that loop is still in your cable, I'm booting you from the meeting.
I've tucked it around behind my head. It's where it should be. I was just going to note, I was actually going to ask how he's getting it into vMix on a Mac, but he must be running an emulator or something. But just a reminder that when you look at the HDMI inputs on ATEM versus BMD screens, there is a color difference, and it's been very common in BMD stuff, basically since the original Cine camera. It's just one of their presets.
I think what Philip said is that he's running the Zoom on the Mac. He comes out of the Mac through his ATEM Mini into the PC, I think is what he's doing. That's running the vMix, I'm assuming.
Yeah, in that case, I would probably double check in vMix to make sure he hasn't accidentally changed the color settings on the input.
Courtney?
Like make sure they're all set to default.
Yeah, and I would also go back to the Mac and check the second monitor output, which she's using for the HDMI feed, although it's mirrored, because I think you can set a different color profile for that second monitor. And that
I think what's interesting is from what I'm reading, and maybe something will pop up. Yes, that's what. Oh, so Philip does say, yes, that's what I'm doing. So Philip, the next question is where you're monitoring in vMix and where you're monitoring in OBS are both on the PC, but both look a little bit different. Is that what you're saying? Let's give him a second to pop into the chatter here. So if the two look different at the same monitor point, the same piece of hardware, then it's definitely a vMix setting issue. And both on PC, both a little different, very slightly. Yeah, Philip, I'll also say this, and I have this discussion with my friend Joseph Lanashki, Photo Joseph, all the time. He'll call me about something. He goes, hey, yeah, I'm seeing this little shift. And I said, come on, Joseph, it's color. It moves. It's on the internet. What else do you want? Victor.
Real quick, a little more obscure on the ATEM. If you happen to have your fill source on your upstream chroma the same as that input for that PC, that could be changing your color.
But that would change it in both the vMix and the OBS, which are both monitoring it on the same piece of hardware. Let's move on. I'm bored.
Hang on, Chris. You say color moves. Try setting it in PAL instead of NTSC. The color won't drift in PAL.
Okay. Steve Mahes, thank you for the pronunciation. I'm so sorry I'm not better at reading it. I recently bought a Blackmagic, the 6K, and an ATEM Mini. What on-camera menu settings are recommended when using as a webcam for Zoom calls? I'm going to put out the request that somebody, Bill Davis, makes a video. It's the official office hours 6K as a webcam. Everything you got to set, the order you got to do it, and how to make it work. We're going to have a link. It's going to be one of the most viewed videos on YouTube. Everybody's going to be referencing it. So, Bill, you have something to say about this?
I do have something to say about it. I have not one, not two, not three, but probably 25 separate setting files that have developed over the course of my first 6 weeks with the ATEM Mini Blackmagic 6K camera combo as I tried to dial in what it should look like. And then beyond that, I have an issue where I've got a window over here. And so when I start office hours in the morning, I have very little ambient light. As the day goes along, I get more and more ambient light. So I started doing a look that I would use at start, one that I would use in the middle, and one that I would use at the end. My overall point here is that unless everything is fixed around the camera, these things are going to drift over time. So a setting can be a starting place, but these are also very sophisticated light gathering devices, and you're going to be shading as you go if you want to try to achieve perfection through a whole range.
Or control your lighting.
Yeah, well, I've got most of my windows blacked out, but I didn't want to completely turn this into a cave. So that would be better for video.
Maybe you should.
But it's
I'm just
not,
saying,
I
maybe you
want to
should.
see the sky out there.
But I think part of it is also the, this issue, the 16:9 versus the 4K aspect ratio.
Yeah, the crop thing we solved.
Yeah, and that's just me playing with my Mimo line. Victor, you have something to add to this, and then Sky.
I will post a link to a video that was done by I can't remember the gentleman now.
Please don't tell me somebody beat us to our office hours 6K webcam video that we're
No,
about
it
to
doesn't.
produce.
It doesn't just deal with this issue, but it does deal with the basic menus on a 6K or a 4K and how they should be set for live streaming. So
okay.
Gerald Undone did it. He's an
Yes.
excellent producer. I will put a link to it.
Sky.
And Bill Davis helped me find, yes, the crop concept is because we were using the 4K settings versus the ProRes settings. So, and
that's a bit of a misnomer to say that, because ProRes can be 4K. It's 4K versus Ultra HD. It's an aspect ratio setting. And although I don't know what the button is called because I don't have that.
Yeah, and I think it's tangled up by the fact that the 6K sensor has a different geometry than the 4K sensor. So it really matters which version of the camera you have to get it framed correctly at the sensor so that it feeds Zoom correctly.
Yeah, but I think the core to the aspect ratio thing is that it's bringing in a true, red. And does anybody know why red ended up with, when they made up 4K, because let's face it, they did. Why did they choose that aspect ratio? Does anybody know? And not just make it 16:9? Jason?
It had to do with the original scaling of 1080p times 2, but it actually all came down to
1080p times 2 would be Ultra HD.
Sorry, times 4.
1080, no, because no, 2 wide by 2 high, which is 4 times as many pixels. But 1080, 1920 by times 2 wide is Ultra HD, not the 4096.
You mean UHD 4K? That had to do with the existing LCD panels and the cost of manufacturing, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't know. Thank you, Red. Mike Andrews from Chicago. I've heard of this guy. A buddy wants to check in on his 16-year-old son while he's in his virtual classroom on a Chromebook without disturbing him. I think the mission is to view the camera, but suggested using VNC to view his screen. does the Genius panel have any other ideas? You know, I heard a story about a certain school district where the teachers were had asked parents to sign documents that said that they would not listen in on their classrooms. Creepy. Anyway, anybody, can anybody, Colin, then Stuart, then Joe.
Mike already knows this, but for everybody else, VNC, the VNC protocol is implemented through a wide variety of tools at this point, including things like TeamViewer, Tight VNC, and many others. Other tools that you might consider would be the native tools like Mac remote desktop and Windows remote desktop, just because they're somewhat less intrusive. Either in any case, you're going to want to make sure that and test this in advance without the kid being there to configure each one of these tools that whatever tool you're going to use to be as unobtrusive as possible, not prompt them for permission and that sort of thing.
Stuart,
but
Jeff,
yeah, it's
Jeffrey, Joe.
Iffy proposition either way.
Stuart?
I would actually say don't do it. Firstly, because there's a whole trust issue with your child. Secondly, because if the Chromebook has been set up by the school is probably already monitoring it, and you're better off talking to the teacher, actually finding out where your kid is up to in their education process and having a better relationship with the teachers so you can help. But yeah, trust, and also anything you load on that system is a potential hole for anyone else to access. So I'm going to bang on about security and keeping your kids safe.
Jeff?
That's probably to follow up. Yes, you're absolutely right. And I missed the part where this was a Chromebook. In that case, what you're dealing with is the Chrome Remote Desktop, which is a Google solution. It does work. It can be configured to be private. But yeah, on further reflection, I would agree with Stuart. It's not something you really want to be doing unless you absolutely feel you need to.
Let's move on. Jeff?
But it's not for me to say.
Also agree with Stuart about talking and having the trust issue, but to answer the question, go outside of the Chromebook and just a baby monitor or web nanny cam.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I was going to suggest a webcam, putting the 16-year-old into an area, not in the bedroom, put him into an area that's more common area. That way you can put on a security camera. That way you can check the security camera. The other thing is to talk to the teacher and say, hey, can you give updates as to how he or she is going, if you see them, if you don't see them, or anything like that. And that can help without having to put any type of security holes inside that Chromebook.
Joe?
Yeah, a Chrome Remote Desktop should work. I agree with what everyone else is saying regarding putting a webcam. That's the only way to really do it undisturbed, because any piece of software you use on the machine will ask for permission, and if it doesn't, I wouldn't install it, because if you can log in without explicit consent, then someone else probably can as well. And I would agree with what Stuart was saying. You probably shouldn't be doing it, especially if it's a Chromebook, especially if it's a school-supplied Chromebook. There are a lot of potential ethical, legal, and other issues that you're opening yourself up to. So a conversation with both the student or the kid and the teacher would probably be a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's a 16-year-old too. That probably plays into it. Let's move on. Jason says, I'm working with a small church this week who wants to overlay hymn lyrics into their live feed. The catch is they're undoubtedly going to try to pipe the music in from an external source, whereby making time sync impossible. Does anyone have a clever solution? Yes. I would do it. I would do it manually. Let somebody advance the lyrics one slide at a time.
So you think just preload it into the switcher and just
Yes.
go overlay?
Yes. I would take Keynote. I would compose the lyrics one line at a time. They can even get fancy and make them, look real pretty. And then you take somebody who's familiar with the music and you say advance when they're done singing that line. It's done like that in churches all over.
I like that. What do you have,
It's
Jeff?
Same kind of thing. If they don't have a physical switcher, then OBS can do this. You run OBS on the same machine as like ProPresenter, where they're probably running lyrics, and you just scrape that lower third and merge it into the video stream, and someone advances slides in ProPresenter or whatever you're using for lyrics.
Well,
at the
I will undoubtedly be asking them to buy hardware. I mean, part of this initial meeting is just to sit down and get a sense of what they need. But I already spent a few minutes with them on the phone, and I have a pretty good sense that you know they're going to want the lyrics, but you know, as per usual, they don't have the manpower to support what I would usually do. So yeah, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I think that in most cases, what you would find is either you're going to find a volunteer, maybe who's somebody who feels close to the music of the church, but maybe isn't quite a singer, you know, who would be willing to step in. You'll also find that a lot of churches will have multiple feeds, and I've been in churches where they have multiple computers, one running the lyrics for broadcast and one running it for the audience. And then in some cases, and there must be some piece of software that I don't know about, maybe somebody knows. I've seen, if you look over your shoulder, you know, up in the balcony, a lot of times they'll have another video screen there that has the line they're currently singing on top and the line that's coming up on the bottom. And that might be a split off of, you know, maybe they're doing something from ProPresenter. I don't know. Let's do a couple of these. Colin, then Bill, then Stephen, then Sky, then Stuart.
If I understand this correctly, they have pre-recorded the music and they need to sync it up with a pre-prepared text. The best way to do that is with a tool like MuseScore. Or alternatively, one of my clients runs weacompany.com, might be interested in implementing a service for churches along those lines.
Good question. Jason, is the music pre-recorded or is there a live band playing?
I'm not sure yet, but my sense of it is that they have a front of house mixer and they're accustomed to doing this with an analog mixer. So that was my sense of it. I don't believe that it's live, but I can't say that for sure. It could, you know, I
sounds
may
like there's
show
more
up on
questions to
Wednesday.
ask.
Yeah, it may be an organist, and you know, and I'm completely wrong.
And bringing in the you know,
Yeah,
I can't think of
Jason,
it.
catch up with me later. I have a thing that might work.
Bill, then Stephen, then Sky, then
Just
Stuart.
noting that injecting text into video streams is what teleprompters can do. So you can get a teleprompter piece of software for $199 on the App Store, and then put it on an iPad and switch that in through HDMI into anything, and you should be fine.
Yeah, I'd go to Keynote before I use the teleprompter. Stephen.
Yeah, what we've done here is essentially do the whole pre-record. The organist loves it because she doesn't like flubbing it live. So we record on Thursday night, then iMovie, put the lyrics in, ta-da.
Stuart, then Sky. Stuart,
Muted,
you're gonna lose your turn if you don't unmute. Okay, you lost your turn. Sky. Go ahead.
Okay, I have three solutions. One of them won't be popular and one of them's a question. The first is volunteer the worst singer in the choir to be the person who advances the text on the screen.
Stuart, congratulations. I have a special job for you. Bad news is you're the worst singer in my choir.
The second is the software that Victor was using to do beat matched switching that failed. Is there something like that that can advance the text? And the third solution, which is not going to be popular, is atheism.
Oh,
Sky.
Well, that
these are my clients.
The having been doing a way of doing this for the past 22 weeks, we do it all inside of a media shout, basically a PowerPoint, shoves it and we just shoot a full screen, and I use it on channel 4 on my ATEM Mini Pro, then the other reality is face masks and humans are going to have to be the same. I mean, you've got laws now here in the state of Washington. You cannot gather without face masks, and you cannot sing. So the pre-recording is what we've had to do on the Wednesday or Thursday night. So having people singing even 6 feet apart, there's a whole legal issue that you're dealing with as well.
This
Third
is
thing
crazy
is
that
you
there's
just
laws
shoot,
that
you
say I
just shoot
can't
that
sing.
second camera up at your big projector screen. So there's the right solution, and then there's the right now solution.
Victor?
So I'll send you a link of how we're doing it.
All right. So just to clarify for Stuart, the software didn't fail. I failed to buy a license for it. It would have worked perfectly. So QLab would be and do what you're looking for. Also, the second one I'm exploring right now is called Vezer, Vezer, and it looks like it has a lot of potential. A lot cheaper, about $129 versus, although the rental plan on QLab is very reasonable. It'll do what you want.
Beju?
Yeah, the traditional ones is normally using either Pro Presenter or Easy Worship to do the lyrics. They have a lot of the tools built in. You feed that into the video mixer as an overlay. You could also use Resolume, and you can also automate some of it using OSC or MIDI. So you can have somebody just triggering the next slides through that, or using Companion as well. And as Victor mentioned, QLab works. You can also use Vezer with MIDI as a combination. You can use Vezer to do the triggers and some of the automation, or just use MIDI manually and control via OSC or DMX.
But I gotta say, if you went into that meeting and said, I have a solution for your lyric problem.
Atheism.
Denounce your Lord and Savior. I mean, come on, Stuart.
I don't know. With
you're
all
fired,
of those
Stuart.
acronyms, maybe atheism might be the best choice.
Anyway,
I wonder how many
I'm
of
harsh
these
but
lyrics
honest. I'm harsh
programs
but honest.
do other languages, because there's so many religions and so many faith things. I wonder if they do it different. Like I was thinking, isn't Hebrew done right to left instead of left to right? The possibilities are endless.
Jason, did this discussion give you any ideas?
I have a few ideas, none of which are atheism. Thank you, Stuart.
Okay. I honestly, I've been in many churches and it's usually just manually advanced. James Badabit in San Diego says, what caused Mickey's MixPre to fail today? Any ideas, Mickey?
Well, I was prepping the MixPre to be sent out because let me switch. Okay. Yeah, I was prepping the MixPre to be sent out because I've been sending out MixPres to clients so they can self-record themselves for like talking heads kind of stuff, or just simple voiceover. I was prepping it to be sent out. I put a BDS on it, a battery distribution system, so that they don't have to think about plugging it in and all that. It's just a matter of powering it on, set your levels, and go. So yeah, I was setting it up, doing all the routing stuff, naming the tracks. It was running off the Sony batteries using the Sound Devices mount. Once I had it all set up, I just wanted to test the BDS, the battery distribution system. As soon as I turned it on, MixPre powered off. Won't turn on anymore, no matter what power source I used, no matter if there's media in the unit or not. Won't turn on, and it's there on a shelf dead. So bye bye MixPre. I guess I'll have to send it in. I sent an email to Sound Devices earlier, but haven't heard back yet.
Well, good luck. I'll be interested to see how quickly you get a response. And
in the past, like more or less a day, I get an email back. Because yeah, I've been sending like other Sound Devices gear for them, just every few years, just for maintenance, and usually in within a day they get back to you.
Next question, Hasmuk says, what video resolution does Teams, I believe he means Microsoft Teams, default to? Skype hogs bandwidth to deliver good video. Is there a Guy Cochran trick in Teams to deliver 720p? So first of all, first question, does anybody know what it defaults to? And there's a decided lack of hands. We don't know, Hasmuk. Yes, Skype does hog bandwidth. And does anybody,
Well, we have
Here's
Guy
what I know.
Cochran here to answer the Guy Cochran question.
Well, I don't know. Guy can't answer that question. I will tell you this, that I did a bunch of recordings for the Microsoft show that Sky was a part of, who has stepped away from the building. And I thought the video quality looked great. The user interface is a little unusual, mainly because, according to Mike, we've spent 600 hours in Zoom since the beginning of this thing. Jason.
I can speak to the Guy Cochran trick. What you do is you take Zoom Rooms, you sign up for a Zoom Rooms account, and then you join the webinar. You join it into your Zoom room, and that automatically kind of kicks the featured presenter up to 720.
But the question is there a Guy Cochran trick in Teams?
No,
in order
the
to
answer is
deliver?
absolutely not. Microsoft is insanely opaque about it.
Okay. Mickey?
Assuming that like Teams is built off of Skype, doesn't Skype run 1080p if the bandwidth could handle it?
I don't know that we can make that assumption, but possibly.
There was a hardware rack-mounted box that Skype, under the most ideal in a vacuum circumstances, can run 1080p. I've watched Alex struggle with it. It is a massive pain, and that's if you know what you're doing. So in general, the answer is less than 1080p.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Phil, I pulled one question back because it said it was an audio question. Brian Anderson here says, I use ProRes as my mezzanine codec. I've never used CineForm since the name has GoPro in front of it, but just learned that CineForm was accepted as a standard by SMPTE in 2015. Any thoughts on uses for CineForm? Stuart. First of all, Stuart, can you explain, like I'm 5, what a mezzanine codec is?
Okay. Raw or uncompressed is an acquisition codec. Mezzanine or intermediate codecs is things that you use for, well, actually, it's kind of an out-of-date process that was sort of related to Final Cut Pro, where you had to conform all the incoming vision to something that Final Cut would read, whereas real NLEs like Edius would just edit the codec straight out of the camera. H.264 came out as a export and delivery codec, but has been co-opted to be an acquisition codec for lower level professional and consumer gear. And then there's H.265, which is a very long GOP version of H.264. Do I need to go into backwards and forwards prediction?
No, that's okay.
Okay. But as for CineForm, yes, it is a older format. Yes, putting GoPro in front of it did cause problems with other NLEs because of GoPro's software. If anyone wants to look up the waterfall error, you'll find a whole heap of people who had Premiere and Edius and other NLEs that installing the GoPro software killed. And then you ended up having to wipe the system and go again on Windows. Yet it's not common to use CineForm. I believe KineFinity's raw codec is based on that, and I believe KineFinity and Red will eventually come to blows with more lawsuits from Red.
Roscoe, you had your hand up and were shaking your head in a discomforting way. Did you have anything you want to add to this?
Well, a mezzanine codec is simply, you said 5-year-old, so it's, imagine the old pinwheel you had as a kid, and when the pinwheel stops, I can see each and every wing on that pinwheel. That's a mezzanine codec. Every frame of video has something behind it. Okay. But a non-mezzanine codec could be a whole bunch of different things. MP4 would be the first one that comes to mind, since most people's consumer cameras are doing MP4. And so that doesn't have a blade when you stop the pinwheel.
Bill, then Sky.
Okay, so once upon a time, video was the same thing. These frames would go onto tape and they'd play off tape and they'd all be the same. Then they digitized everything. When they digitized everything, they had to do clever mathematical tricks to get these analog signals into digital. And so the reason for mezzanine codecs, which has nothing to do with any one NLE, it's a concept. And that is, if you have highly compressed original footage and you want to run it into any NLE, you can run it into an Avid, and you took something that was a real messy, long GOP, highly compressed format, it couldn't play it back efficiently because it took a lot of computer power to uncompress it, throw it to the NLE, and then recompress it later. So mezzanine codecs were simply a way to get the missing data there so the NLE could see it. Any NLE, could be Avid, could be Premiere, could be whatever. Now, the best of the NLEs could do a lot of that on the fly. So when 10 first came out, one of its joys was that you could throw a lot of stuff at it and it'd play it back and it'd do it on the fly. But if you really wanted smooth operation, you should optimize and get it into a single codec, ProRes in that case. But they were doing the same kinds of things in Premiere, and Avid had, remember back in the AVR 77 days and the rest of that, they had the same kind of thing going on. You have a codec for acquisition, you have one for editing that is rock solid, and then you export to whatever your user needs. The mezzanine was the codec in the middle that the editor had absolute access to for their purposes.
Okay, Sky?
So pre-internet, there was an offline and an online process, and we would, yes, use proxies or a much smaller version of the same thing. I'm curious if mezzanine is an architectural term, a thing that you go through from to, and I guess I'd love to either have Courtney or Roscoe define how did we end up with long GOP, and why do we have to continue to deal with it, and why is it so bad?
It's compression. It's just to compress it.
Bandwidth
Jason?
shortage.
Mezzanine is an intermediate codec, and a mezzanine in architecture is, the way you get there from here. That's my understanding of
It's
the
a
origin
floor
of the
between
term.
two floors. The mezzanine
Yes,
hangs
thank
out
you.
between two actual floors of a building.
Oh, it's a metaphor. Okay. Now, why does long GOP? Why is it? Why? Can we?
So
Courtney,
in the
please.
simplest, I'm sorry, probably somebody has better engineering, but
Courtney got it.
Well, long GOP was invented to deal with the fact that computers, most, off-the-shelf computers couldn't play back intra-frame compressed or uncompressed HD video once you got up to HD. So long GOP was the solution. So you're just doing, an iframe and then individual progressive frames that are just the difference between that iframe and the next frame. And the longer the group of pictures, the higher the compression, which means that the smaller the file size, which means you can transport it over the internet, you can play it back. And with hardware decompression these days that is optimized for H.264, you can get really high quality, much better than, QuickTime playback off a long GOP, as long as you're not trying to do any trick play modes, as long as you're not trying to go frame by frame or go back to a specific frame or slew in high speed
Like
or low
editing.
speed back and forth, like you do need to do in editing. That's why editing uses a mezzanine codec, where they convert that long GOP into individually compressed frames that stand alone. And that way you can stop on any frame, you can go forward and backward, you can go high speed, low speed, etc., without having to wait for it to render all of those in between frames.
Editing long GOP is a miserable experience.
If I can.
Yes, Roscoe.
Well, Jason had his hand up, so let him go.
Jason?
I just wanted to mention, like, if you want to nerd out on codecs, there is a beautiful thing that I just put into chat from SMPTE.org, and I am not kidding. It is from Bruce Devlin, the chief media scientist, called "What the insert expletive here are all these formats," and it's a PowerPoint he did from 2015.
Yeah, we have to go back and realize that a lot of these formats actually originated on tape and then went to these little SD cards, and they had no storage. They were very small. They had very limited bandwidth. A DV tape has a very specific bandwidth, and they went to DVC Pro 50, which doubled the bandwidth. So GOP was designed to fit the limitation in storage.
So let's all just agree that things are better now and move on. What do you say? Can we do that? The short answer is yes, people have a lot of thoughts on CineForm. I'm gonna move on. And I think, are we into audio only now, Phil?
You're asking me. Wow. Okay. Sure. Audio, but I don't see the question. We just got the one question right now.
We
Okay.
got 2 non-audio questions still remaining.
Yeah, let's move those over. I'm gonna go boom,
We need to
boom.
make some audio questions, everybody.
Yeah, we're gonna answer Jeff's question here. Looking for battery recommendations for a Lilliput FS7 monitor, small SDI monitor to be used to set focus and framing for POV cameras. Sony F970 style battery, would like a low profile, inexpensive, short-term use, short-term, high milliamp hours not needed.
Sorry, autocorrect. Short term.
Bill Davis, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
Well, so I have probably half a dozen devices that use that Sony F950 style battery, and they have smaller and lower profile ones. Of course, if you have less battery material in there, you're going to get less time at the rated current of delivery. So most of us have a big bag full of those big 950s because we just don't want to mess with battery changes too often. But I get the point. On a monitor, something like that, it can be back heavy and can be kind of a pain in the butt. I have tried probably 6 or 7 different third-party battery solutions. Most of them work okay. Occasionally you'll go on Amazon and you'll get some and they don't last very long. They're not particularly high quality batteries. The Sonys are expensive, but they do last, I think, as well or better than all the rest. So you just, if you're going to do something, I'd try to read the reviews on some of these sales services and see that people are getting good results out of that brand. That's
So let's talk
gonna be
about the
pretty important.
monitor though. Who's got a monitor suggestion? Mickey and then Stuart?
Oh, sorry. I didn't know he was asking for a suggestion for a
Yeah,
monitor, but
I've got the monitor.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So you're just
Yeah,
looking for a battery solution.
in terms of the batteries, yes, the Sony ones are pretty decent, but I've been fairly impressed with the batteries by Hawkwoods. I have a bunch of the F550 and F590 style ones, and yeah, I have like 2 or 3 dozen of them, and they're solid. Like the power density on those things are very impressive.
Power density. Courtney?
What's the DC input on that? Is it 12 volts? Because the Sony batteries are 7.5 volts.
7, yeah.
It's 7.
Stuart?
7.
A lot of those monitors have replaceable backs where you can put in like a little battery carriage. I would look first at what camera you're using. If you're using a Sony camera, stick to the F970s. If you're using a Panasonic camera, the batteries are about that sort of size for a GH4, but the same battery that's used in a GH4, GH5 is a Pentax LP90 will fit, and they last a lot longer. Whereas that's a LPE6 from a Canon, and you'll record for about 45 minutes on the Canon cameras. The Li90 out of the Pentax in either a Pentax camera or a Panasonic camera will record 4 hours of video.
So, my
it
question
might be a really good compact battery if you can change the back panel on the Lilliput.
Jeff, what POV cameras are you using?
Little SDI security cameras. They're Mocos.
Do
So
they
they're
have
cheap?
Are they battery operated?
No.
Okay.
They're going to
So-
stay in place on stage for the duration, but just
Right.
their
So
manual focus.
you don't
manual zoom.
necessarily have to match a camera specifically.
No.
Did you get some good input on this?
I did. Thank you.
All right, let's move on.
Hey Jeff, one thing I
Or
just
we'll let
looked inside
Bill
my battery
add.
thing, and so the top one is a Sony, the bottom one is an OEM from a company called Caster, and I found those to be very good. I've had good luck with them. I think they were substantially less expensive than the Sony OEM ones.
And Courtney says, has anyone noticed the CBS blip verts now appearing on the network for NFL? 15 frame promo, half second in length. Really? Explain, Courtney.
Yeah, I just noticed it 2 nights ago, and it looks, and they've crafted it to look like interference coming in. So there's like 1 frame of block, bit block loss, and then you say, and then a slide comes up, it says coming soon for about 2 or 3 frames, and it glitches again, and then it goes NFL on CBS, and then it goes away. I counted the frames, 15 frames.
Wasn't there laws written about subliminal advertising?
That was going to be my point. Is there subliminal advertising laws? Now these are self promos for the network, and they're tagging them onto the end of their own promos for like Love Island or something, and then you'll see this little blipvert at the end. It'll just be, and you go, "What was that interference?" And you go back and you look at it.
Courtney,
and it's an
please
ad
tell me
for
you're
the
not
NFL.
watching. Please tell me you're not watching Love Island.
No,
Sky.
this is the promo for Love Island. I do not watch it.
Sky.
Well, I used to work on Pokemon, and they would do the white flash frame, but it would cause a epileptic seizure in
I
certain
know that,
people.
yeah.
And so the only fix, because it was animation, you can't just go back and reshoot it. We had to turn the chroma way down. And so rather than a white flash, they turned to gray flashes. But the whole, Courtney, you must explain where blipvert comes from, please.
Well, that's a term invented by the writers of Max Headroom, and that was one of the
yeah.
subplots of Max Headroom, was the network was inserting blipverts to control people through mind control, subliminal mind control, or subliminal advertising on their
Art imitate life, or does life imitate art?
Exactly.
All I know is I still can't fold my car up into a briefcase and walk into Spacely Sprockets with it.
Or Jetson too.
Right. Let's see. What do we got here? Audio. Well, we are transitioning. We're gonna do, for the next hour, we're gonna do basically the same thing we've been doing for the last hour, but allegedly the questions are gonna be mostly about audio. So we'll see how that works out. Jeff Francis, MacBook 2016, new audio problem. New audio problem. Playing audio through the speakers when volume is low, the audio is correct. When I increase the volume, the audio suddenly becomes muffled and stays that way. Fine in the headphones. Being that it's a 4-year-old computer, I would wonder if there's any dust or biological matter sitting on top of the speaker somewhere inside. And Victor tends to agree. I'm guessing that hand gesture is the universal hand gesture for I agree. Colin?
Not that kind of effect. It's
No,
a sudden change to become
what,
all of a
what
sudden.
you're dealing with is because the thermal problems with that laptop, the adhesive that adheres the speaker to the chassis has melted. So when you get a higher volume vibration, or a vibration yielding or from a higher that arises from a higher volume, you get the speaker vibrating against the chassis, and it kills your audio. I had the same problem on mine and ended up replacing the speakers. Cost me about $100 out of warranty.
Jason?
Yeah, just to add on to Colin's answer. So at first, I've seen this with my clients, and instead of the, normally when you blow out a speaker, it's the cone, it's the element that's moving. In this case, it's the outside element that has melted or have been separated, and yeah, that's a known issue.
It's pretty amazing how.
Oh, and Apple will do it for $150. Anybody else will probably do it for $100. Anybody third party, right, Jason?
I mean, or you can go on iFixit and, do it yourself. It's just not that hard.
Assuming you have the tools. That's always my problem, not being able to find the toolkit easily enough. And iFixit hardware, iFixit tools are not the cheapest tools you can find either.
What a business model. Explain how to fix things,
it's
and
brilliant.
then sell people the tools.
Yeah, I'll sell people the instructions to fix it and the tools to fix it and the components. Very cool.
I will tell you that I have a MacBook Pro of approximately that era. And when I turn it up beyond about 40-50%, the right speaker goes bad. Victor.
Yeah, same issue.
OWC will sell you the tools at a much more reasonable price in my experience.
Larry Jacobson from Cheyenne, Wyoming says audio. Please explain the difference between 44.1 and 48 kilohertz and which is best to use as a general rule, whether for non-critical versus critical audio. Do these have to do with sync when shooting video?
7.9 kilohertz.
Jason, then Jeff, then Mickey. Oh, hold on. Wait. Forget everything I just said. I'm going to go first to our audio godfather. We're going to go Greg, Mickey, then Jeff.
Well, I'm gonna second what Courtney says. It's 3.9 kilohertz difference, and it depends on how much you have to pay for those 3.9 kilohertz. In my opinion,
I thought I was going to get some wisdom.
44.1 typically is for music. 48 is typically for anything involving picture. Okay, so and they're actually speed references. Sample rates are speed references.
Did 44.1 get birthed out of the evolution of CDs?
Audio
Yes.
CDs.
Yes.
Okay.
And they have to do with sync when shooting video. Yeah. Well, if you play at the wrong speed, it's just like tape playing at a different speed. You know, it's gonna be out of sync, and it's gonna be faster or slower. That's the short answer.
Mickey?
Yeah, exactly what Greg said, of course. And yeah, if whatever hardware or software that you're using is expecting a specific sample rate, like say a lot of like video related software and hardware is expecting 48 kilohertz because that's the standard for sound for picture. Then if you put in something that's 44.1 into it, then it's gonna play off speed. And yeah, just to build on again what Greg was saying, like one way to think of a sample rate is like frames per second. Like say for film, it's typically 24 frames per second. Like video stuff is 30 frames per second, or 29.996, 29.97. For sound, for picture, it's 48 kilohertz. So it's like 40,000 or 48,000 frames per second that we're dealing with sound.
Jason?
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. In general, picture a sine wave, that's an audio thing. It's how many times you chop it up in a second. SMPTE standard, which is what you should always be using for video, is 48. Everything audio is 44.1. So yeah, I agreed with everything that everybody has already said. And look up the Nyquist theorem if you really want to nerd out about this.
Does anybody have anything new to add? New. It better be new, Bill. If it's not new, I'm kicking you from the room. Go.
That's fine. I just want to do a practical thing. So the practical thing that really matters is if you're shooting video, your video camera will probably have a setting. You can put it on 48 kilohertz. You can also put it on 44.1 kilohertz, old Sony Betacams. You could even set 4 audio tracks at 32 kilohertz. If you use anything but 48 and you're going to bring it into a video editing circumstance, you are shooting yourself in the foot. Good software will transcode those rates kind of without you doing much, but don't bother. Just set them to 48 if you're shooting video. That is a video only rule.
Stuart?
I'll add to what Bill said with 48, yes, but 96 kilohertz is also acceptable. And adding something new, the 44.1 is actually, it's double the maximum frequency that you can encode. The cutoff frequency was actually set at 22 kilohertz, but that is after quadraphonic, because quadraphonic set a cutoff frequency at 20 hertz and then a space between 20 hertz and I think it's 22.5, at which point it would start to encode from there to 44, the next pair of speakers.
Okay, so
yeah, there are reasons why those frequencies were chosen, but for
Larry's
CD,
question is, which should he
sampling.
use?
48.
48, that's the answer.
48.
We're going to move on, gentlemen. Sky. Hey, Sky. If the 3 elements, Sky always has a really interesting way of framing things. If the 3 elements are fire, water, and story, visual, audio, what is the correct priority of these 3 elements with my limited resources to make a video or film?
And why? Why? That's the last word is why.
It says way.
I know it does.
I'm going with way because I trust the script. because the story's the most important part. I think I would go story, audio, visual. And everybody's nodding.
Good call.
Story, audio, visual. And I'm a picture editor. You know, I mean, you can get away with a lot of bad pictures if the rest of it is, you know, we were talking earlier, I can't remember if it was during the show or pre-show, about the mumbling in Tenet, right, Greg? Yeah. And you know.
Well, the reason that I think your order is correct is because in the show, huh? No, it's not correct.
Courtney's waving me off the runway.
Oh, that's good. I think that the what it is that good picture can never save bad sound, but in many cases, good sound can always save bad picture. So, you know, I would have to rank them in your
They
order.
also say if you have picture and no audio, you have technical difficulties, and if you have audio and no picture, you have a radio show. Courtney?
Yeah, well, you see, you just proved your own point wrong, because you talked about the mumblecore or the mumbling stuff. If the audio is unintelligible, then you can't follow the story. So audio has to come first, and then story, and then videos. That's my order, and I'm sticking with it.
I will say this, that when I mentioned the Tenet thing, I was really just trying to flex and prove that I had been paying attention for the last 2 hours. So no, I do think the audio is important, but I think you can have an audio with a really dark picture, or you can have audio with a, I want to hear what Stuart has to say.
But if you can't understand the audio,
go
then...
picture, man.
As a cinematographer, yes, make sure the audio is right. Nobody complained about the audio on a very dark episode of Game of Thrones, did they? Because you could hear the dialogue, you could follow the story.
They complained most about the water bottle under the chair, as I recall. Jason?
Yeah, and the coffee cup in front of the nearest Targaryen, yes. But yeah, from a visual, from a cinematographer point of view, yeah, get the audio right, because it gets, like Alex has said with our Zoom, it gets tiring to listen to, and people lose interest.
Sky, I think I reject the premise of the question, because you said limited resources. In the story, the only limited resource is your imagination, so that really shouldn't be on there.
Expand that, because story to me is priority, because that's what we all come. I mean, all this other technology is going to change by the minute, because manufacturers have to keep selling us stuff. My point is,
so you could be a smartass and say one of your elements is time, but I mean, if you assuming what you're after here is a story, you know, I've found that my productions go the smoothest when I have an insanely clear idea of what I'm trying to create. It is the fastest possible way. Storyboarding is fast, if not unnecessary almost, because it is absolutely clear in my head. So you said, given my limited resources, barring time, they're really, you know, the limit of the story is your imagination and how you tell it. It's not really something that belongs in this audio video thing. It would
be an interesting scientific experiment to create. You'd have to do some eye tracking and whatnot, but you'd create a scene multiple different ways, and one where the picture is lacking, one where the audio is distant or muffled, and see how audiences react to it.
Guy with a psych degree here, we've actually done a fair bit of that, and pretty much, as long as the audio is on, people will pay attention. I mean, Alex has said this a lot, and he's almost always correct. And yeah, it's been studied a lot, both in other mammals. We've done primate studies in this stuff. And
Jason, you are now my lab partner for the next coffee video. Sorry.
Jeff Francis?
I would counter Jason and say that time is the most limited resource.
That is, by the way, so listen, that is, by the way, you know, we do a lot of work for this very, very high-end realtor in the San Francisco South Bay. And that is one of the ways that they sell these high-end homes in the South Bay because they always say the time is the one resource you can't buy. And so don't you want to live close to the office? Therefore, you should buy a house in Palo Alto for $20 million. Bill, do you have any final words on this?
Well, I just want to expand a little bit because I believe 100% what everybody said in the realm of narrative filmmaking. But narrative filmmaking isn't all that video can do. And I want to make sure that people understand that artists can make video with no narrative. And there's more than just tell a story linearly through your video. And I've got a couple of friends who work in those. There's no story. They're just trying to create mood through light and color, and audio may not be, or it may just be all sound effects, or it may be the sound of buzzsaws or whatever. So in narrative, this is all very true, but that's not all that video can be.
Moving on, Craig Hibbard says, my sound setup is improving because of office hours. Yay. But many of my clients and friends have terrible sound. I tell you, I get on a meeting where somebody's like off mic and I get angry. Even though they say I sound good, they are not willing to do the most basic improvements. Any suggestions for gently improving their sound? I'd mail them a mic. I'm about to do it with some of the people I work with. Jason?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on if you want to be passive aggressive here or not. You know,
I
you
don't mind
could
being
say, well,
aggressive.
I'm sorry, I just can't hear you over the terrible audio that you're piping into my eardrums. But, you know, at the end of the day, no, I mean, you can't, ideally, you can't in a civilized world force anyone to do anything. But you can stop them and say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. You cut out, even if you can infer the meaning, if they're micro stalling. I don't know. I mean, that's odd. I would just say, you know, Alex's answer here is, my job is to make you look good. But if your job isn't to make them look good and, you know, they are peers of yours, then it's going to get a little difficult.
We will now go to the audio triumvirate of Greg, Mickey, then Jeff Francis.
I think you could inconvenience them, you know, consider, what was that? Excuse me?
I can't understand a word you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I have the same issue, you know. Some of the meetings I've been in have been just hideous.
I mean, I'll tell you this. I don't particularly even like most of you guys, but I come here because I can hear you. No, I'm kidding. Mickey.
Yeah, exactly what Greg said. Like inconvenience and like the times wherein I'm the one who organizes the meeting and sends out the links, technically being the host. I like if someone is like noisy, I start muting people and say, sorry, I have to mute you. You know,
Yeah.
being totally passive aggressive about it, and peer pressure.
I thought it was interesting last
closes
week.
in on them.
I thought it was interesting on Saturday when we had Mark and Steve on, and I was a little shocked that Mark Spencer, his audio wasn't better because, you know, he and Steve do shows all the time, and I thought he sounds fine. And then, you know, we kept muting him because there was so much background noise. Jeff Francis?
Pull them one person out of that meeting and ask if they have a minute or two to stay after the meeting and just kind of talk through that individual problem to get them to improve. You know, I did that with our dean where he had his level set too high and was just clipping, and you just asked him to pull back a little bit. And then the next meeting they sense an improvement, and then kind of pull a different person out of that next meeting, and things will gradually improve.
I can't remember if this is something that specifically happened to me or it might be just a story that Alex told about. No, actually, I do recall we had a guy who said, well, I'm just want to do my recording from our conference room because it works really good in there. And we went to the guy and it was horrible. And it dawned on me that it works really good in there meant to him, I don't have to do anything. He had never heard himself recorded from there. And as it turned out, it was one of these conference rooms that had the little bat mics all over. And sitting off camera was his assistant who kept, and I'm going to try and do this, you know, he kept putting his coffee cup down and sliding it around on the table. It's like, what is that noise? Please make it stop. Greg, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to thank Jeff for being the voice of reason here. You know, the rest of us are me and Mickey are a little militant about this, but he's really got the right idea. Try to gently persuade him, and pulling one guy out of the group and getting improvement one by one is probably the way to do it.
Sky,
good call.
Well, again, I also want to thank Jeff and Victor and TJ and Bill, because you have come on
Me?
to personal
What about
Zoom
me?
meetings. What? Personal Zoom meetings, and help me modify, other than the clicking sound. We're still figuring that out, but thank you, Jeff.
Roscoe?
Yeah, there's actually a psychological gobbledygook here. People don't want to improve because then COVID won't end. And people actually, by improving and buying into COVID, then it's not going to come to an end. People want it to end. So they are resisting changing right now because they want to go back to where they were. They don't want
Yes,
to be
that's
in
the
these
head
forms.
and the head in the sand theorem. Yes.
Do you think that's true?
Do I think it's
I
true that
hope
COVID's
not.
going to end? I hope it does.
No,
but
no.
The
Do you,
psychological resistance?
yeah, do you think that people are saying like, this is just
sure.
temporary?
Sure. Yeah.
So
of
then
course they are.
then the question becomes, how long do you think people will just say, this is just temporary?
Oh, never put a limit on people's ability to delude themselves. Like, don't do that, Chris. You're
Well,
just going to be wrong.
They're going to resist the change, but eventually people are going to figure out this is a new way of communication that's going to be around now for a long time, and we should all buy into it.
Well,
But it'll take a
it
while.
has been around. It just hasn't been taken very seriously. Courtney?
Oh, this is just temporary was what they responded to during the writer's strike when everything went to reality television. Now, has that gone away now that the writer's strike is over? I don't think so.
Yeah, that was kind of a thing. Mr. Comfort. He raises his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, now entering the room, Chris Comfort.
I think that people are also resistant to tech. Not us, of course, but the civilians who are doing the Zoom meetings don't want to buy more stuff. I have people coming to me complaining about their neck hurting and their back hurting, and I say, $50 on a wireless mouse and keyboard and get your laptop up, and they balk at that. They think it's like way too overkill, and I'm like, $50 versus what? Hundreds of dollars of chiropractic and neck braces, and I think they just don't want to build up their stuff.
Hundreds. I want to go to your chiropractor.
Yeah.
Hasmuk. Let's all wave at Hasmuk. He's taking a picture. Do it again. Do it again. We're waving this one. Okay. Moving on. Craig, I hope that helps.
Chris, that's for my webinar tomorrow.
Yeah, good luck with your webinar. Are you do you feel prepared for it?
Yeah. I think I've learned enough through osmosis so that
Your
I don't
camera
have
is
to...
looking spectacular today. Like really, really good. This is far and away the best I've seen you. I know that we had a bit of an orange hold on, I'm pinning you to take a look at this. Yeah, it's a little wider. I think
yeah.
Does everybody agree? Hasmuk looks great today.
Yeah, I got a light up above my head, so that's made a significant difference.
Your white balance is really spot on.
It's spot on, and the black level, the level of the gray in the back. Although I know that you went through multiple shades, 50 Shades of Gray.
He's wearing a white shirt.
Did you go through 50 Shades of Gray by any chance?
Yeah, bring out the Oscar, guys. Bring out the Oscar.
All right, let's move on. I think it looks wonderful. Peter Collins says from Vail, Arizona, what can a call center or telephone support line do to improve their audio? Agents at home or in the center often sound awful. Something concrete they can pass on to management from a customer. Courtney.
Higher bandwidth, because I think those are all VoIP systems, and when they get busy, packet loss goes through the roof, and then you start sounding like a robot with pieces and bits and pieces. So higher bandwidth connection.
I'm going to ask everybody to put their hands down for just a second. First of all, let's talk. let's do the first round of answers that are technological and then physical changes. So tech answers, Jason, Stephen, Victor.
That's a good question, Peter. I've actually had to work with call centers on this in the past. One good way to fix this is by standardizing. Just write a manual. Here is how you plug into your modem. Here is if your VoIP phone is set in. Here is your DNS setting. Here are the acceptable Bluetooth headsets if you want to use one with your VoIP phone. Yeah, that's what I got.
Stephen?
First off, all you need is 16K, mainly because that's all the call center will push out. And considering I know about 40,000 agents, and when I took this whole thing over, we dropped it to 16K, and ta-da. Because when you sit there and try doing 48, coming out of the PBXs and stuff, it's not using it. It really is not using it. We're only going from about 700 to 11,000 kilohertz. That's it.
Victor?
Just to add on what he just said, talk to your call center software administrator and have make those settings for you. If it's the company, talk to them. They'll make the correct settings for you. I agree totally. 16K ran call centers for years in my regular job.
Okay, now, is there any physical things that we could advise people? Jason?
Standardize your headset. Standardize it. That's easy. That is the easiest one thing you can do if they're working from home.
Roscoe?
Oh, he's got about 100 of them.
Tucker actually posted in the chat, and it's standard. Cheap microphone, always move the mic closer to the mouth. If you can get the mic closer to the mouth, you will get a better signal to noise ratio. It will sound better.
Yeah. I was teasing, I think Paul has left the building. I was giving Paul a hard time. Paul, I hope you're listening. A couple of weeks ago on a private meeting saying that, he needed to be able to monitor himself. And then I felt bad that the end result of me pushing him to monitoring himself was that he was now hearing himself with a little bit of a delay. And obviously that's part of it. You need to be able to monitor yourself without the delay. And I realized that that's another thing. Call center. I'm going to move on from call center. Ken Jones from Seattle says, and the word microphone after digital handheld, thanks. Add the word microphone after digital handheld, thanks.
I think that's part of the next question. That was a comment for the next question.
Look at us doing things in the right order. I'm going to put that like that. Okay. In a live audio session, PA in a large meeting, I have a digital handheld microphone and an analog one. Each has different response to voice. Should I use a pink noise source to EQ? What measurement tool can I use to display the response in real time? Think cheap. This will be a one-time use. I'm going to jump in on this because I've done a fair amount of this. Yes, different mics respond differently to voice. Pink noise to EQ the room in the PA world. I think that's called smart, the smart system. I think it has 2 T's or something, but it's a way to, to get a flat response on your speakers, which may or may not make the microphone sound good. It also might just prove how bad the microphone sounds. But I think there's many tools that have, I think there's even an iPhone app that gives you some semblance of a response curve, but it's of course dependent on the iPhone. So let's go to Mickey, then Jason, then Stuart.
Yeah, what Ken is trying to do is to tune his PA to the venue, so that the response between his amplifier setup, his speaker setup, and the space is neutral, and what is coming out of the board is supposed to be what people are hearing. Now, for a one-time use thing, just play back a music track you know by heart and just use that to tune it. Like, no need to spend, because like, unless you go and purchase like proper measurement tools, which cost some money, then there's no real point. So just listen to something that you know by heart and EQ your PA to that.
Jason?
Uh, yes. First, Mickey's answer was perfect. I'll just pull out the aside thing and then just move on. So white noise has equal power per frequency. Pink noise has equal power per octave. So it's not a flat response curve. That's I'll let everyone else answer the rest.
Okay. Stuart?
Okay, this is probably going to sound a little strange, but I'm going to talk about a technique that is pre-digital era. That was taught to me by somebody who was smarter than me with audio. It was called talking the room, and I don't know if Jason or Mickey will have ever heard of it. If you've got a PA set up with you've got at least a 32 band equalizer, you pull all the bands down, crank the amp up, and come up one band at a time until you get feedback at the frequency that that band controls. Then pull it down until the feedback goes away. And you go through each level on the equalizer one at a time, and you will get a waveform that matches the feedback in the room. You do this when the room is empty. Then when the room is full, you can bring the levels up a little bit because the human body absorbs sound. Now, it's an older technique. It's I see somebody's actually called it ringing out the room in the chat. It's not as it's not as good as idea as actually using pink noise and white noise and doing it properly. But for a one-time use, it will get you by as long as you're careful with your levels during your event.
Mickey wants to comment on your technique.
Yeah, ringing out the room is definitely part of setting up a system, but that is different from actually tuning the system to the room.
Yeah. There was a guy I met years ago, and unfortunately I can't remember his name. I'm that old. And he had a standard thing that he did when he walked into any room to mix. It was actually his wife who was a singer, and he would mix for her. And the first thing he would do is he'd reach over for the EQ, and he'd take 2K and just pull it out. It's like, yeah, don't need that. Just drop it down. And he just said, 2K is annoying. I don't like it. He just pulled it down universally. And I got to say, the show sounded great. Greg?
Well, I guess he's actually talking about trying to EQ the two mics so that they match.
He doesn't actually say that. He kind of implies it.
Well, there's a little something in the chat that just flew by.
Yeah, he just followed up his question, Chris.
I missed it. I don't read the chat.
He's talking about equalizing two dissimilar microphones. Well, I mean that's a whole different story. I mean, I would get rid of that situation as soon as possible. No, but seriously, if there's, if you have wireless handhelds, you can buy similar capsules. You can get an SM58 capsule on anything. You match your capsules. Give yourself a fighting chance. Don't, it's worth the money. Don't fight this all the time.
I will also remind Ken that it's a one-time use thing. It's going to be over in an hour or two. You can move on.
Yeah, don't match your mics if it's one time.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to move on. Sky says ATEM Mini Pro, which are better, the audio levels button on the physical switcher, or should I use the audio buttons and sliders in the ATEM software? Jason?
That's a non sequitur. It's a distinction without a difference. So like the up-down buttons, move them up and down a set dB. I want to say it's 5 or 3. I don't remember. If you need more finite control than that, open the interface. That's it.
I just don't have any physical buttons or knobs or tick marks to see that, but that at least helps me know that up or down 5 dB is how many.
Mickey, do you know if that little Korg USB fader thing that you got me to buy would somehow work in that environment?
Uh, I don't know for sure, but I know like there's a way for ATEMs to be controlled by MIDI. So maybe this some help. Somebody
Guy
can link
might
it.
have the
I don't
answer.
know.
He has his hand up.
I was
Problem
just
with
going
the
to
MIDI.
comment that
Oh, sorry,
it's 3 dB and it's just whatever's convenient for you. And also wanted to point out that you can add the software on multiple computers. So for me, a lot of times I have the camera color corrections up, so it's hogging up my whole display. So I'd like to have audio on a second one. So I believe it's 5 to 8, depending on the model of ATEM you have that of computers that can join in. So you can have like the media pool on one, so a graphics operator, somebody switching. So another computer, or just depends on how you want to grab it. Because like right now I have mine pretty close to me. I prefer just touching the up and down arrows or run it through a MixPre and call it a day, because the MixPre seems to be bang on sync, whereas I'm still having issues with the ATEM itself in sync unless I drop out and switch audio sources. So you might want to look at that.
Well, I'll bet you the person that sold me my ATEM Mini Pro DV store would have a MixPre for me next if I.
Yeah, I got a whole bunch of refurb ones in, so come by the store.
Ooh, deals.
I think Mickey needs one.
See my way through the smoke.
Bobby Spangler from Campbellsville, Kentucky. Now I'm gonna say Bobby's kind of breaking some rules here because he's spanning his question over two questions. So I almost want to throw it out, but we have enough time. Curious if anyone else has had this issue with the latest Blackmagic Design desktop video update, breaking audio in OBS when using a deck link input card. The meters in OBS still show level, but there's no audio on the streaming output or in the monitor output. Rolling back desktop video by one version fixes the issue. I've run into the same issue on both Mac and PC, both using the HDMI and SDI inputs. Thoughts, comments, snide remarks. Jason.
My initial snide remark is always when you have issues like this, Blackmagic video drivers are required to be preloaded. They are kernel level, or as near as you can get to a kernel level, and that's on Mac or on PC. Uninstall, reboot, reinstall, reboot, then plug your thing in and see what you've got.
Brilliant. Everybody's saying yep. Okay. Roscoe, you have something to add?
Most important tool you can have is Carbon Copy Cloner on the Mac. That way, whatever you've done and it messes up, you go right on back.
Yep. Stan Chan, my neighbor to the north in Roseville. Mickey mentioned that getting the Isotope post-production suite was a good value if you need it with dialogue match. Since that requires Pro Tools, and I am starting to like using Reaper as my DAW, is it still worth it? I also will be picking up the Fab Filter total bundle as well. Mickey, any comments?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that dialogue match was just a Pro Tools thing. I mean, I use Pro Tools, but so I didn't know that it didn't work on other DAWs. I would say the metering tools and that's part of the post production suite, like Insight, is also very powerful. So if you could use those and you can afford to get the post production suite, I would still get them. But if not, then RX Advanced would get the job done. And Fab Filter, love their EQ.
Greg.
And it looks like RX only works, as the dedicated app in Reaper. It doesn't look like it works as a plugin.
What does dialogue match do?
It looks at the EQ curve of the dialogue and tries to apply the same kind of sound. For example, it's great for punching in ADR. Like if you're trying to match production sound and you just need to punch in a line that was recorded in some other studio with a different microphone. If you want to try to match the tonality, the sound of that, ADR line, dialogue match saves the day.
Or perhaps somebody with a digital handheld microphone and an analog.
Exactly, or a cell phone nowadays.
Bill and then Roscoe.
Our buddy Tucker DeGoo in the chat just gave us a little recipe. He said, roll off the vocal mic at 180 hertz and focus on making the high frequency sound the same will get you close fast. We miss you, Tucker. Come back soon.
Yeah. I was
Mickey,
just thinking about
my question, Mickey, was, does that also align the waveform? Because there is a tool called Vocal Line
No.
that'll actually, you
A
know,
vocal line is more for
lip sync.
Sorry, what exactly are you trying to align?
That was my question. Yeah, ADR or whatever. But my question to you was, does the tool you just mentioned also do waveform alignment, like Vocal Line does?
No.
Okay.
No, vocal line would sync up. Sometimes it's used to sync up ADR if the takes are kind of loose. But if you need to align the same take but from different sources, like say on set, if you need to align, like face accurately align boom and like a boom and a lav, so you can play those at the same time. A great plugin for that is Auto Align Post.
So they're complementary tools, not competitive tools.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Tim Van Dusen from Sherwood, Arkansas, I think. Is AR Arkansas or it's not Arizona? I don't know what AR is.
Oh,
I
AZ
apologize.
is
AZ
Arizona.
is Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But AR.
AK Alaska.
It's
so
Arkansas.
that's Arkansas.
Okay. What are the benefits of a pop filter on a microphone? I bought a $60 Fifine mic and it didn't come with one. Trying to decide if I really need one. Bill.
So when you say certain sounds, predominantly P's, and you can tell that I've got not only a windscreen here, but this is a particular mic that avoids too much plosive sound stuff. But if you have a sensitive mic, particularly large diaphragm condensers, the actual wind from making a sound like P or th will move the diaphragm and create a very distinct low frequency pop. So you want to use the combination of windscreens, pop filters. They have them that stand off from the mic to stop that wind before it hits the mic, and just vocal technique. You'll notice that most of us don't look directly at and speak directly into mics. We tend to speak across them to eliminate some of those plosives.
Jason?
If you could visually see wind coming out of your mouth, you would see these red bursts coming out when you say certain syllables, P's being one of the most prominent ones. What the pop filter does is it breaks that so that the wind doesn't directly hit the element and cause either distortion or, not an even input.
And I like to be, I think, a kind of a voice of reason. If you don't need it, you don't need it. You don't need to spend the money on it. You might be better off doing something smarter with your money. I have a very nice microphone, but I use literally a windscreen that you buy at Radio Shack for an SM58 style thing, and frankly, maybe I don't even need that. But I've just always had.
Wow,
it
you
on
sound
there.
a lot better without it.
Does it
You
sound
have
better?
a Radio Shack?
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah, I was
much
gonna
better
say,
without it.
It's
Oh,
clear.
really? Oh, okay, cool. So that sounds better.
Oh, yes, it sounds like the microphone that it is.
And oh wow, okay. Here, take this for the outtake reel. Interesting. Wow. But I'm not using any kind of a pop filter, and maybe it's like what Bill said, technique. Courtney,
You just
then
answered his question.
Well,
You're using a Neumann. He's on a $60 mic, okay? Like, let's just
here's-
bring that up.
The way to.
But if he doesn't need it, he doesn't need it.
Well, I was about to answer that. The way to tell if you need it or not is to place the microphone where it's going to be comfortable out of the shot, in the shot, wherever you can do it, and then just watch your level meters and go and just make plosive breath movements like don't vocalize. And if you see the meters jumping, because your headphones may not be able to hear that low frequency, but they may be transmitted. And if you see your meters jumping when you're just doing then you know you need the pop filter.
My microphone looks weird.
It's all naked.
Stuart.
This is a $60 microphone from, well, actually $79 from JCar. And the cheaper your microphone gets, the more you need the pop filter. A cheap pop filter can be made from a piece of hanger wire with some stocking material over it. And for what Jason said about seeing the sound, that's called Schlieren photograph or photography, and it's often used for tracking ballistics. But it will actually show you how the air is moving, carrying the sound waves. It's beautiful stuff. Smarter Every Day has lots of videos on it.
I don't believe that this is an audio question, but James Babbitt has an interesting one.
Can Stuart define stocking real quick? Because somebody's going to put a sweat sock in there, and that's not going to be as functional.
We used to use nylon.
The sort you would see on a very shapely leg.
Pantyhose.
Thank you. And Chris.
Oh, the wind is kicking up here. I'm gonna have to
Don't
go
use
take down my
fishnet.
sails. Good grief. How can a Zoom host show everyone the text from 2 different PDF books at the same time? Currently, we use screen share in Zoom to show just one of the books. I think we did a tutorial on using OBS and how to show a couple of things up at once. Greg?
Well, couldn't you just use that? I don't know what it's called on the iPad, where you can actually have 2.
Possibly. I know that
A pull over or move over or something like that.
I think that's for showing 2 apps at once. Maybe you can show 2 documents at once and then patch that in.
Well, you can do 2 different instances of the same app, which would be a PDF reader or whatever it is, preview or whatever, right? So you should be able to get those 2.
Yeah, but James, OBS is free software and doable. Bill?
Just open 2 documents on Word and share the screen. I mean, you can put them side by side, you can put them up and down. This is, DocuComp's been around forever.
Yep. Good point.
That's true.
All right, that's it. Today is Tuesday, which means tomorrow is invariably going to be another Wednesday. The second hour, we're going to talk about camera stuff. Thursday is, help me out, somebody, who's the artist that's going to be here? Somebody knows. It's in a document somewhere. Thanks for the help.
Wasn't it the one that didn't want to be on because of
it's not
not
that I don't
having
think he
great
didn't,
audio?
It's not that he didn't want to
Peter
be on. I
Himmelman.
think
No, he
had
wanted to
some-
make sure that his performance came across as good as possible. And
Peter
wasn't
Himmelman,
confident
Doug
in his system
Maltby
at the
put it in
time.
the chat.
And then Friday and Saturday will be education. But I want to thank everybody for being here and being so nice.
Nice job, Chris. Good work.
Helping me with my audio issue here. I now feel, like I'm actually doing a good job. And we'll do more of this tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So thanks, everybody. We'll let Mickey do the short version of the audio. Am I the host again? Let me see.
Now you're staring at a naked Neumann. Does its
Your
gender
video
even
looks
matter?
great. Asmuk, your video looks great.
Good luck on your meeting tomorrow, Cosmo. We look
Yeah.
forward to hearing about it.
Bye.
Get well.
Make you
Alex.
feel at home, Chris.
Get well.
I'm
Lots of
letting it
fluid.
sting. I like it to sting.
We're
I know
getting
that
there.
Mickey
We're getting
can
to the
stretch
end.
it, but he's not going to do it.
Let's get to the end.
Or maybe he is
Everyone
gonna
turn
do
their
it and he's
camera off at the
laughing.
same time.
Well,
Good night, y'all.
there we go.